Hello everyone, my name is David Oimbo of Bytecode and I'm here to bring you developer insights. Let's go. For this tutorial, we're creating a simple input field that should be able to handle different scenarios. And I mean suffix, prefix, and things like the label, description, and subtext. So we'll be handling these different variants, and we'll also handle things like focus and disabled. So let's get to it. The first thing we want to handle in this tutorial is actually breaking it down. So how are we going to approach this problem and how are we going to solve it in order for us to have a reusable component basically. Okay, so I'll head on to Sketchpad to give us an example of or an overview or an image of what we'll be working on. So let's assume that this is our input field. We want a scenario where we can have something like a suffix, a prefix, and we should have our main input field here basically. So although these borders will be invisible, it should look like a single input component. Okay, so this is step one. So these are step one. We should make something like this. Then we want the colors here to be able to, that's the border around this place, to be able to match a subtext that we keep here, and it is based on the type of input field. So if we could have an error field, a success field, something like that basically. And another condition is when we click on this, or when this input field itself is focused, we want to be able to handle and we want to be able to show it on this, on the total input field container basically. Okay, so this is basically everything that we'll be doing in this tutorial. Is a straightforward problem and we'll try to work on it in a straightforward manner. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to create the HTML file and the CSS file. So in the description below, I'm going to be including a link to the repository for this, to the GitHub repository for this tutorial. You can choose to follow along or you can check the full code example on GitHub. Okay, so the folder structure I'm using is very simple. So we have an src folder that holds all our code, and in the src folder I have an input field. Let me make this larger. I have an input field HTML file and I have an input field CSS file. Okay, to follow along, we would need two extensions for this tutorial. So the first one we'll be needing is Emmet. Emmet is pre-installed in VS Code, so you don't need to install it. So Emmet gives you auto completion for your HTML files. So if I do exclamation for instance and I press enter, it should give me the boilerplate HTML file and we can work with this. Okay, so I'll cut this out. Okay, so the second extension we'll be needing is the live server. Okay, to get the live server extension, you can come over to the extensions tab and search for live server. Okay, so we have live server here. I already have it installed. You can go ahead and install that on your PC, on your MacBook, and okay, you should be able to get the functionality that we'll be needing for this tutorial. Okay, we can use exclamation to create the boilerplate. I can give this a title of input field, and so that we can have something in the DOM, I'll give it an h1 of, and this is the body for instance. Okay, so to display this in our browser, we can click on this go live. Okay, and we have this. Yeah, so this is a good starting point. And since we don't have everything sorted out just yet. Okay, the second thing we want to add to our HTML document is our CSS. We want to link our CSS to this HTML file. So we can use link So I made a mistake. Input field. Okay, so for the link, the CSS file is in the CSS directory, and I have this file here. So I can go to CSS input fields for CSS. Okay, just to test if it's working, I'll give it a rule on the body, background red. Okay, so can validate that our CSS file is attached. Okay, so on the input field, I want to change some things, and the first thing I would like to change is the font for this document. Okay, so I'll head on to Google Fonts, and the font I would like to use is Roboto. Okay, so I have the Roboto font here, and I would just select on. Okay, I selected all the Roboto font. Now click on here so I can get the list of all the ones I've already selected. I can choose to deselect them from here, but no, I'll be using this. Okay, so yeah, so I don't want to use the link in my HTML, although I could, but I'll be using this import in my CSS file. Let me move this aside so that you can see the screen better. Okay, so I can copy this and dump it in my CSS file. Okay, then also, okay, when I do this, it won't automatically apply it. We still have the former font here. So what I want to do is, on my HTML elements, I want to give it a font family that is Roboto and a sans serif fallback. Or you can just copy this from here. Okay, and now we can have this. So let me comment this out so that I can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, so we can have this. Okay, so let's get on with the main stuff now. Okay, so one thing I like doing is, on all my elements, I like to set the margin and padding to 0 by default. And another thing I like doing is setting the box sizing to border box. Okay, yes, so we can get started from now. So if I click on this go live, you get this after installing the live server. Okay, so when I click on this go live, it will save this HTML file. Okay, I'm not on the HTML. It will save the current file that I'm on. So let me dispose this and go live. Okay, yeah, so it's saving this, which we've done before. Okay, so what I'd like to do is, for things like the colors, most of the colors, I'll not be directly inputting them into the CSS itself. I'm going to be putting them into I'll basically be creating a CSS variable for each of them. Okay, so the ideal place to put your CSS variable is in your root element. So in the root element, I have a few CSS rules I would like, and I'll copy and paste them here. Okay, they are quite straightforward. So we have the body background, which will be the background color of the body. So it is quite straightforward. We have the body background, which will be the background color of the body itself. We have an error color, secondary color, background color, and success. And you can see the colors being previewed right here. Okay, so we already have that, and now we can start writing our CSS. So for the body, I want to give it a background of body background. I'm using CSS variables here. To declare CSS variable, you just need to use the double hyphen and put the name. And when you want to use them, you can just use the var function. If you want me to create a tutorial explaining how and where you can use the CSS variables, please leave a comment in the description. Okay, you can leave a comment on this video and I will make a video for it. Okay, so I can give it a color because the contrast between these two is not so much. I can give it white by default. Yeah, I want some breathing space for in the body itself so that I can walk inside. I can give it a padding of 3 rem. We are good to go. So now we can start working on this. So we have a div, and the first one to work on is this, and we'll consider the simplest scenario first, but keeping this in mind. So this is our goal. This is our goal. So the first thing we want to do is, this is the simplest scenario. We have a container with an element inside. So this is our goal. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure the element is inside of this, and we have things like focus and yes, we have things like focus and the placeholder color can change it, and just some small things that we can tweak. For instance, the caret color, that's the vertical bar that shows that you are typing. Okay, we can change the color of that. That's the first scenario, and we should get that done. So this first one, I'm going to be calling it the container, the input container. This will be the input element itself. Let's get our HTML done. So we have input container, and inside the input container I have an input element with the class of input element. We have this small inputs. I would increase the size so that it can be more visible on a smaller screen. Yes, then I'll give it a placeholder text, which is placeholder. Okay, so now we can start styling. Okay, so here let me say input container. I want to make this okay. So for my input container, I want to give it a background of red just to see what is happening. Red. Okay, so by default a div will take is a block element, so to take the full width. Okay, so that's why this is happening, but we want some things here. I want to give it a height of 40 pixels, and I don't want it to be so long. I'll just say the max width should be around 400 pixels, for instance. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is, let me make this, okay, I can leave it as red for now. I want to give the height of 40 pixels, then the max width should be 400 pixels, and I also want to give it a border here, a border radius. So let's say border radius is 6 pixels, for instance. It's looking good. Okay, so let's go back to our sketch. So we want this to be the full height. There shouldn't be any space here. Anyway, so, okay, so we want the element itself to be the full height. So what we want to do is input container input element. Okay, so you use this arrow sign, this greater than sign, to select elements that are the children of a particular element. Okay, so if you want me to create a tutorial on CSS selectors, you can leave it in the comments and I would do so. Okay, so on the input element itself, I want to give it a height of 100%. Okay, so we have the height is full now. Okay, so I can also give it a width of 100%, but and before we get to that, we can just consider this scenario. Okay, so if I give it a width of 100%, I might not have enough space for all this. So the layout I want for the container itself, that's since this is our goal, layout I want for this container should probably be a flex, so that it can be side by side. Okay, so I'll change this container to have a display of flex instead of block, which it has by default. So I want to give it a display of flex. Then on the input element itself, I want to give it a flex property of 1 for the flex grow, 1 for the flex shrink, and 100% for the flex basis. So it's going to take up full space, everything it can. Okay, so another thing I want to do is I want to be seeing the background of this container itself. So I'm going to give this element a background of transparent, and you can see some border here. So I'm going to remove any border or outline that it might have, an outline of none. Okay, so yeah, I'm making some progress. Okay, so now another thing I would like to do is this background, instead of it being red, we can give it a background of input background color. Okay, and we should have this, which is looking good so far. Then for the placeholder, to select a placeholder is a pseudo element. So you select the elements, the input element itself, then you can use this to get the placeholder pseudo element, and you can give it a back end, let's say a color of red, so that we can see it. So we have a color of red, but I want the color to be the secondary color. Okay, we have this. Okay, so another thing I want is a breathing space from left and right. Okay, so the breathing space, that's, we'll just give it padding. That's, I'll give the padding of 12 pixels. You can give it anything you want, but give it 12 pixels, 0 for up and down, and 12 pixels for left and right. Clean. Yeah, and this is looking good, but there are some changes we'd like to make. For instance, the text color, when you have a value, the caret color itself, I'm not sure you can see this, but the caret is black. So I would like the caret color to be this placeholder color. So the caret color, I'll give this caret color to be okay. So the caret color has changed. I'm not so sure you can see it, but then we don't want the only thing that should be showing that this element itself is focused on to be the caret. So we need some border around this input element, this input container element. I can give the border of 1 pixel, a solid border, and let's say white, for instance. Okay, we don't want this to show every time, we just want to show when we are focused. There's a CSS selector, which is the focus within that you can use on any element. And what it does is it acts as a focus on itself, and also this rule is activated when any of the children of that particular element is focused. So if we do input container focus within, it means that everything inside this will be respected when any element in it is focused on. Okay, so we want to give it a border when the element in it is focused on. Okay, so when we do this, yes, and this is good, but we do not want the small jerking that is happening to the text. For instance, okay, this small jerking is not a very good UX. So what we want to do is we would make the border always be there, but it should be transparent. Okay, so this works. There's no jerking anymore. But then since we are overriding only the color itself, we don't want to leave this duplicate here. For instance, so if I change this to 3 pixels, we would experience the checking again, because the border that was there before was 3 pixels and the new one is 1, so we get that small change. Okay, so what we want to do is we'll override the border color only to be white, and what happens is it takes the 3 pixels now. So I'll just change it back to the 1 pixel, and I want the color to be the secondary color. Okay, so this looks good, and I'll say yes, we've solved this. Okay, maybe for one thing, yes, the color itself is not white. So we'll make the element, that's this selector for the input element itself, and we'll give the color of white. Yes, so if I do its value, and if I, yes, so this is very nice, and we are done with this. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to have a suffix and a prefix. A suffix and a prefix, rather. We'll work on this suffix first. Since we already have a display flex on this container, we can just continue to add any element left and right, and it should work. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to look for some icon in Iconify, and let me search for the image icon. Let's say this looks good. Copy this SVG and paste it before. Yes, this looks good, but we have some issues now. We need this to be aligned. What we want to do is on this input container itself, let me bring this down. We should set align items to center. Should take it to the center. Then I want more gap between these two, so I can give a gap of 4 pixels, for instance. Yeah, this is good enough. Then this color, I don't want it to be white. The reason it's taking white is because the color for the document itself is white. That's the color rule that's reaching it, is white. For instance, if I change the color on the body, which we set to white to red, this should also turn to red. Okay, so what we'll be doing, and the reason why it behaves like that is because we have this fill current color. Okay, we have this fill current color on the SVG itself, which is a good property. So here I can come along and say on the input container I want a text color of input secondary color. Yes, this is good. Okay, and we are done with the suffix, and we are kind of done with the prefix also. We just need to add another element to the to the end of this container itself. So let's say an info icon. Just set for info. This is good. Now copy this. Paste it here. Okay, then we can adjust the size here. Let's say 20 pixels. Yep, we are good to go, and we still have the same behavior we would want. Yeah, so this is good. So we can come back here, we've solved this also, and we are almost done. Actually, we are almost done. So the other things we want to do is, okay, if this is an error, we want the border to always be displayed, and it should be a reddish kind of color. Okay, so for this I would copy this a few times, Okay, just to space them out. Okay, so this second one, I would say this is the one with the value. I'll call it with value. It's it can stand out from the ones without the value. Okay, so for this, I want to call this the inputs. I want to add another class, input error, and here I want to add input success. Okay, so what you just want to do here is we just want to override this background color and make sure. Okay, so for the inputs, let me call this input container action. So on the inputs container, and if it's an input error also, I want to give it a border color of red. Okay, so we have this is the error, this one with error, but I don't want to use this actual red. I already have class here, the CSS variable here. I have the input error color, which is quite good, and we also want one for the success. I have the green here. Okay, so for the input itself, I'll say we are almost done. Okay, so for the last thing that I did not consider is the disabled state. So if you have input disabled, we also want a disabled on the input element itself. So what we can do is for the input disabled, and just give it an opacity of 0.5. This, okay, sorry, disabled, opacity 0.5 and cursor of not allowed. Okay, we can see that the not allowed cursor is only showing outside the element, the input element itself, which is not what we want. We want it to show everywhere. So what we can do is I can say everything inside the disabled element. You also have this, so we can see it works everywhere, but then this icon itself also has an additional opacity, which is not exactly what we want. So what we want to do is we'll extract this and make it separate and give it a cursor of not allowed, and I'll remove this. Okay, yeah, so we are done with the basic states. So the next thing we want to do is the labels. So we have a label here, that let's say this is the input element, input container. We have the label, let me call it L. We have the description and we have the subtext. So I'll just write on this first one, I'll write label here. On this second one, it will have both the label and description. Let me add the subtext also. Okay, so what I'd like to do is for each of them I'll just give them a class. So for this one I'll give it an input label class. For this I'll give it input description, and this should be input subtext. Okay, so let's start with the label itself. So let me call this input text. Okay, so let's work on this label first. I'll give it a font size of 16 pixels and a line height of 20 pixels should do. Then a font width 500 and a margin bottom of, let's say, 1 rem. I know the 1 rem is very large, but I want to show you something. So I will do something very similar with the description itself. So description, I want to give it, let's say, 14 pixels. The line height, this is 1.5. Okay, so let's say we have these two scenarios. The first one is, okay, if an input container is following a label, I want to give it a margin bottom of this 1.5 and 1 rem, and if it's a description, I want to give it a 0.5. But there will be an issue if we do it this way, because there will be a conflict here. So what we'll do is we'll select the input label and we'll use the plus selector to select the direct sibling after it. And if it's an input container, we'll set the margin top on the container to 1 rem, and we see that it disappears. And we'll just do the same for the description also. For the description, we'll set the margin top to 0.5, and we should be good to go. Okay, so instead of this, what I'll just be doing is, I don't want this large margin, so I'll just set this to 4 rem. It will actually be the same thing in the end, or it's just a nice thing to know. Sorry, 4 pixels. 4 pixels. Okay, then for the subtext, input subtext, for the input subtext, I want to give it a font size of 14 pixels, then margin top of 2 pixels. Okay, so you just give the tiny margin here. Okay, so what we want to do is, for a normal input field, that's this one, that is not an error or a success, we want the subtext to carry this secondary color. But for the error and for the success, we want the subtext to carry this color. So what to do is, I would come here and I would duplicate this for the error and for the success. Okay, so what to do now is, I want to select an input container, and the element, the direct sibling after it, which is input subtext. Now I want to give it a color of input secondary color. Okay, which is good, as we have the same color for the placeholder, this border, and this. Okay, then for the error itself, I want to do basically the same thing, but I want the input error. I want the color to be error color, and for the success, I want this to be success, and we should change this to input success color, and we are good to go. So yes, this is good. We have different variants. We have the empty without this. Let's, for the first one, just as an example, I'll remove this and this. Yes, so we have the empty one, we have the one value, we have an error, we have a success. Yes, so this is it. So if you enjoyed the video, or if you have any changes you'd like to make or suggestion, you can leave it in the description below. Do well to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This is Oyinbo David of Bytecode.